I'm going to be talking about 5 steps every small business owner must take before reopening from a COVID-19 shutdown. About a month ago, I started getting phone calls from a lot of my small business clients asking me this specific question: well, what do? I had a thriving business at this point, a month ago or 2 months ago, and all of a sudden I can't open my doors. What do I do? So based on that, I set up these 5 steps that every business owner should take before they open their doors. Actually put together an article, and if anybody would like a copy of that article, my email address is on this screen. I'll put it again at the end of the presentation. I'm happy to share it with you. And if you have any questions about my presentation, send me an email. There certainly wasn't time during this, given the limited scope of this presentation, to take questions, but any of us are happy to take questions. You can email me with regard to my presentation, or Angela or Shannon with regard to their presentations. Angela, if you could go to the next slide. There we are. All right, so step 1, and this, my clients are primarily small businesses. So my clients are anywhere from sole proprietors to small businesses up to $3, $4, $5 million worth of debt. But it doesn't really matter the size of the company. I can guarantee you that Neiman Marcus and these other major retailers and these major corporations that are in financial trouble have gone through this same analysis. So it doesn't matter the size of the business. First thing you have to do is identify and categorize the debt. Well, what is the debt? What kind of debt do I have? Is it secured or unsecured? What does that mean? Is it secured by a bank loan? Could the bank come in and take assets back for failure to pay? Unsecured, for the most part, is general trade creditors. There's tax debt. There are all types of debts, and once that debt is identified, and I'm talking about the debt that is existing now. You're thinking about opening your doors, but you're opening it up to not only a changed world with regard to a pandemic, but now you're saddled with debt that you didn't have months ago because the debt is accumulating. So identify the debt. Then figure out who's liable for the debt. The smaller the size of the business, the better chance that the debt is personally guaranteed. Bank debt, for the most part, for a small business, is personally guaranteed. Landlords normally require a personal guarantee from the principals when they give a lease to a small business. So you have to identify who's liable for the debt. You have to identify if there's personal guarantees. A lot of my clients are sole proprietors. Well, those debts are personal debts. There's credit cards in the name of the sole proprietor, even though you're operating under the name of a business. And very often for my clients who have small LLCs and small corporations, they're using their personal credit cards to keep those businesses going. So it's important to identify the debt, categorize the debt, and know who's liable on the debt, because you can't address the debt unless you have those factors. Next slide, please. Next slide. Angela? Up, there we are. Okay. All right. So now, question, this step 2, be strategic with payments. It presupposes that there's money available to pay some of the debts. So what funds are available? I've had people call me that, to their benefit, have built up some capital, and at the time they had to close their doors, there was money in the bank account. I have a number of clients who have obtained their PPP loans. So what funds are available? Some clients have bank facilities that are still available. I've had actually some clients call me to say that their credit lines have been cut off. But you have to identify what funds are available now. And I've been telling clients since this began 2 months ago to identify what funds are available, so you can prioritize which creditors you pay. If the funds you have are through a PPP program, 75% of that money needs to go to pay payroll. The other 25% can be used for other purposes, I believe including rent. Unfortunately, I'm finding some clients now that by the end of this month, or certainly within the next few weeks, their PPP money is going to be gone. They've been paying their creditor, their employees for 8 weeks. They've been using the money. That money may be gone by now. But look and see what funds are available. And from those available funds, you have to pay those creditors that are essential. Pay the rent, pay the bank debt, pay the debts that you're going to be personally obligated for. And I'm sure, I represent creditors as well, and they don't like to hear when I say, or certainly when they're on a program like this, they may not like to hear that when I say you've got to pick and choose who you pay. But that's the reality. Critical vendors have to be paid. You need to have a physical location, so you got to pay your rent. And we'll talk about negotiating with creditors in a second. But if you do have money, be strategic. And everything that I'm suggesting now, I don't expect a small business owner or any business owner to be able to do it on their own. They do need to consult with certainly their accountant, financial professional, and their attorney. All right, the next step, Angela, next slide, please. So communicate with creditors. I've been telling my clients this since this began. Many of my clients are owed money from other clients. Many of my clients are trying to run a business. Communication goes every which way. With regard to my debtor clients, my small business owners, I've been encouraging them to reach out to their creditors, their landlords, their banks, their vendors, before those creditors call them. It's an incredible sign of goodwill. You got to be honest with the creditor. And these days, there isn't a creditor out there that isn't going through the same thing. And when you tell them that your doors have been locked, they're not going to doubt you because their doors very often have been locked as well. So communicate with the creditors, let them know what's going on, let them know what you plan to do going forward, be honest with them. Recognize that the creditor is also suffering. And again, some of my clients that are in financial trouble, one of the reasons they're in financial trouble is because their creditors aren't paying them at this point. Everybody's in this together. And get a sense as to how reasonable the creditor will be. I've had clients that have spoken to landlords who are giving them forbearance, that are giving them a break. I have other clients who've been calling their landlords and the landlords are threatening to take them to court. But you have to get that sense so we can go to the next step, which is step 4, Angela. Step 4 is the most important step that needs to be taken in this process. You've got to decide if the business can survive. You have to start by being honest. You've got to look at your revenue. You've got to look at your expenses. And when you're looking at revenue these days, going back to 2019 or going back to what things were looking like in March when the shutdown occurred is a good start, but you've got to make adjustments from that because on a going forward basis, depending on the type of business you have, if it's a restaurant business, if I'm sure in short order, the governor will allow some limited reopening, but there's going to be a lot of changes that have to be made. So you've got to take that into account, not only on the revenue end, you've got to take it into account on the expense end. There's going to be extra costs of complying with all the requirements in order to reopen. Now, on the flip side of that, I think a lot of businesses are realizing now that, and certainly I'm not talking about my retail clients or restaurants, but there are a lot of businesses that are realizing that maybe they can cut costs. Maybe they don't need an office that they used to have. Maybe they don't need as many people coming into the office. Maybe people could be working remotely. So those are factors that are taken into account as well in your revenue and your expense projections. Identify what funds are available. Shan talked about financing a little bit ago. Can the business qualify for some of those loans? Is there more PPP money out there? Are there other loans available? Does the business have a working capital line? Has that capital line been tapped out? What resources, what funds are available to continue the operations of the business? And this step, more than any of the other steps, but again, you can't, a small business owner especially, can't do this without independent advice. You need a lawyer, you need an accountant, you need a financial professional to be realistic, because the business owner that's got their blood and sweat into a business is not going to be able to make an impartial decision. If we can go to step 5. Okay. If I raise this issue of bankruptcy options to small business owners 2 months ago when things were thriving, they would throw me out. They would say, "What are you talking about? Why are we talking about bankruptcy? We don't even want to think about bankruptcy. It's horrible. Why you bother me with bankruptcy?" Well, these days, if you're a small business owner, whether you're the small business owner that's in financial trouble or the creditor that may not be in financial trouble, you need to know what's going on in the bankruptcy world, because realistically, bankruptcies are going to be part of the solution for many, 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 especially small businesses, but we're seeing now large businesses, large retailers. Every day there's a new large Chapter 11 filing, and small businesses are affected because they're creditors of these businesses, but the reality is these days, small businesses need to know their bankruptcy option. So I start by saying bankruptcy is a legal remedy that should be considered if a reasonable accommodation cannot be reached with the creditors. I've been a bankruptcy lawyer for 30 some odd years. I've always used and questioned my clients, bankruptcy is a last resort. In this scenario, again, if you've communicated with your creditors, if you've done the right assessment, you'll know how reasonable the creditors will be. The smaller the business, hopefully the less number of creditors. The larger the business, the more creditors. It's hard to get your arms around the creditor body. But in those situations where creditors won't be reasonable, the most important thing a bankruptcy does is it imposes something called the automatic stay. It stops things. It's a temporary injunction. It stops creditors from taking action. Many businesses, if they can reopen, will need the benefit of the automatic stay to try to restructure. It will keep eviction suits at bay. It will stop repossessions. It will stop lawsuits. It will give the debtor, the company that's in trouble, some time. There are 3 types of bankruptcies that are available to small business. Chapter 7, which I don't recommend for an LLC or a corporation, but Chapter 7 is a liquidation provision. It liquidates assets. The goal of a bankruptcy is to get a bankruptcy discharge. There is no bankruptcy discharge for a corporation or an LLC in a bankruptcy proceeding. Individuals get discharged. So if there are assets that need to be liquidated, there are actually other alternatives that we recommend for that. So Chapter 7 would be for a sole proprietor, an individual that's in debt, needs to get out of the debt. It's a good option. I'll just jump to Chapter 13, then back to Chapter 11. Chapter 13 is only available to sole proprietors, does not apply to LLCs, does not apply to corporations. It is a restructuring plan. It is a way to get out of debt. I don't have time to talk about the specifics. I'm happy to speak to anybody that has any questions. Chapter 11, that's what we always hear about when businesses reorganize. Fortuitously, in February of this year, the Small Business Reorganization Act was enacted into law. It was actually passed 6 months ago, but there was a 6-month waiting period. So it kicked in right when this virus was taking off. It kicked in during the month of February, and the Small Business Reorganization Act is ideally suited to individuals, if necessary, and small businesses that need to restructure specifically as a result of COVID-19. It's cost-effective. Bankruptcies, Chapter 11 bankruptcies have traditionally been very expensive. Chapter 11 small business bankruptcy is cost-effective. If it goes the way it's supposed to, if it goes the way the bankruptcy code intended, there's got to be a bankruptcy plan in play, or at least submitted to the court within 90 days. So the days of bankruptcies taking months and years under the Small Business Reorganization Act, that's over. And again, I can get into more detail on that. I actually wrote an article on the Small Business Reorganization Act as it relates to COVID-19 that was recently published. Angela, we can go to the next page. And if anybody has any questions regarding that, or if they'd like a copy of that article, the article that I wrote on the 5 steps, or any questions at all, send me an email, give me a phone call.